Please put up with a minute or a minute and 15 seconds. I got to make money somehow. Here's a couple promos. When you have a brand that connects and resonates with your audience, one that creates affinity and loyalty, your brand becomes the golden egg for the people you most want to do business with. So why be like all the other eggs? Be the golden egg. Let's talk about it. I'll bring the goose. Contact me, Drew Zagorski at Left Brain, Right Brain Marketing via my website at lbrbm.com. That's lbrbm.com to set up a virtual or in-person meeting. Left Brain, Right Brain Marketing serves the needs of small and micro-sized businesses with branding, podcast consulting, web design on Squarespace, print marketing and graphic design, brand consulting, and more. Hey business owners, I know you're swamped, and building a WordPress website is the last thing you need. Let Layerly handle it. In 5 days, yeah, I said 5 days, you'll get a knockout site that's SEO ready and rocks your socks. No fuss, just results. Just go to bit.ly/Layerly. That's bit.ly/Layerly and book your call now to get your site live in a week. And tell them Drew Zagorski from Left Brain, Right Brain sent you. This is Drew Zagorski. You're listening to You Don't Say, but not just any You Don't Say. This is a special series of You Don't Say called Totally True Facts. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts or at youdon'tsay.net, and share with your family, friends, and everyone else on the planet you can think of. Facts. They're slippery things these days. Seems everyone has their own version of facts. Well, that got me to thinking about facts, and in particular, what's been called alternate facts. Once in a while, a rare while, alternate facts contain at least a grain of reality in them. They're just spun up into something completely different from the, actual facts. Think crowd sizes. Think telling people you've cut the deficit by $1 trillion. Or think of that little kid who's standing in the middle of the mess who tells you it was like this when they got there. Now, in all these examples, sure, there was a crowd, just not as big as stated. Yeah, the deficit did go down, but not because the person who made the statement did anything to reduce it. And the little kid of the 3 examples, the most honest broker of the truth, well, that rascal may have made a mess, then gone out to play and come back inside, and of course, the mess was still there, so it was indeed there when they got there, the second time. Mom never specified which time she was referring to. Now, one of the things that alternate facts have caused is a whole lot of unnecessary violence, strife, and mischief. Alternate facts have made the world a very stressful and dangerous place. So I decided to create a series of episodes I'm calling Totally True Facts. These vignettes will offer a grain of truth, a reality about what actually happened either in current times or times gone by. But by and large, I'm surrounding them with a mess of alternate facts that I hope at the very least will give you a reason to grin, if not have a laugh, and just to get away from the reality of an all too factually messed up world. These are parodies. Let me say it again. These are parodies. I'll change names in most cases to protect the innocent, though in others, I'll use the names of the actual people for the purpose of presenting the as-mentioned parody. My hope is that you latch on to some of the actual facts in these totally true facts and look up the totally true facts on your own. You're going to get this disclaimer a couple times more before I'm done here today. So here goes totally true fact number 1. The totally true origin story of the Bubbly Creek and a guy named Jeff Schwapovsky, based on real facts. Disclaimer: Totally True Facts episodes are parodies. Let me say that again. Parodies. Names have been changed in most cases to protect the innocent, though in others, names of totally real people are used for the purposes of presenting the as-mentioned parody. I hope that you'll latch on to one of these facts and look up the totally true fact on your own. I got a friend who has a pretty ethnic name like my own, Zagorski. Pretty easy to tell that's either Polish or Russian in origin. It's Polish, in fact, and I embrace my ethnic heritage fully. My pal Jeff Schwapovsky, however, doesn't. He's mentioned to me several times recently that he can't stand when someone asks him about his roots. I've written down his response so that I can share his own words as told to me directly, I swear to God, including information I've forgotten about relating to the South Branch of the Chicago River and probably the old Maurice Linnell Bakery. Here are Jeff's totally truthful words. When people see my name, they often ask me if I'm Polish. No, I tell them. I'm all American. My people are from Bridgeport. If you don't know, by the way, that's a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. At hearing my response, my questioners look at me a little askance, disapprovingly even. No, I tell them again, this is totally true and based on real facts, which it actually is. You see, mine is a somewhat complicated origin story, so once and for all, here it is. Back in the 1800s, the Chicago stockyards opened. Now, the yards were the cattle butchers of the Midwest, if not the entire country. You might think of this place more aptly by calling it Cowschwitz, Lambschwitz, or Pigschwitz. Anyway, every day, millions of livestock of various types were delivered to these slaughterhouses as a stop on their way to so many dinner plates. Good eating, if you ask me. Now, the stockyards were placed right along the south branch of the Chicago River to the immediate south of the aforementioned neighborhood of Bridgeport. The volume of carnage that happened there was mind-boggling. And while the meat, hides and skins, and some other parts and pieces of these chopped up animals made their way to supermarkets, there was still a lot of it that didn't. The conundrum for the packing companies that ran the stockyards was what to do with all this offal. All those tails, leftover bones, sinew, and entrails that weren't able to be processed into something resembling healthy food. All this byproduct was being piled up and couldn't be removed fast enough. So it became a fetid, noxious mountain of gore whose bouquet engulfed the yards and wafted through the environs of Bridgeport. A person could barely breathe without a gag reflex kicking in, particularly on hot, humid days. As the packers met to discuss this problem, a man by the name of August Broniszewski, the foreman at the Armour Slaughterhouse, had a revelation. As the men stood on the banks of the river brainstorming their problem, August, or Gus as he was called, pointed to the river and how swiftly its currents flowed. There was the answer. Simply push all this waste straight into the river and the river would do the rest. While it never fully resolved the stench, it moved the mountains of gore off the meat packers' properties, and the solution worked well for a few decades. But around 1880 or 1890, the volume of waste pushed into the tributary began to accumulate, slowing down and ultimately stalling the flow of the river. Ultimately, the mess began to bubble up, giving this section of the river its nickname, the Bubbly Creek. In fact, the sludge became so thick one could actually walk on it, if they were crazy enough to give it a try. Then, biology and evolution took over. There began to form within all this waste microorganisms which evolved at an astonishing pace. By the late 1890s, these organisms evolved and grew appendages and ultimately developed brains that allowed them to reason and feel emotions. They grew to the size of full-grown human adults. A totally true fact here is they also developed the ability to communicate and learn. They would hear workers from the slaughterhouses talking and joking around on the banks of the river during their lunch breaks. The organisms quickly picked up the English language and would laugh at jokes, causing even more bubbles to find their way to the surface of the river. They often heard Gus's name mentioned since the armor plant was the one closest to this section of the Bubbly Creek, and could also eventually identify him as they peeked out from just beneath the oily surface of the river. Then around 1910 or so, there was a fateful day. A violent storm brewed up. The winds, thunder, and lightning were intense. As the storm raged, a bolt of lightning hit the Bubbly Creek, spreading its energy through the mass of the foul brew and four of the life forms within, triggering the final stage in their evolution. Electrified with life, the four slithered out of the creek as fully formed humanoids, and once onto the shore, they stood up and shook off the froth and spume from the putrefied morass that formed them. The thrashing rain served as a shower, getting the worst of the residue from the river off of them, but they were still pretty much a nasty mess. Having arrived at work very early that day, from his office inside the slaughterhouse, Gus Broniszewski caught a glimpse of the naked, filthy couples and ran outside into the storm. Gus called him over to come inside. They looked at one another, not quite sure what to do next. One of them suggested following Gus, and the others agreed. When Gus asked them what happened, they responded in unison by saying, "Lightning." He understood. He asked if they were okay, and they all shook their heads. He told them to wait where they were, then ran off to the locker room. He returned with towels and coveralls for all of them. Did they need a ride anywhere? He offered to put them in the wagon and give them a lift. Would they like some coffee? They thought that sounded good, not even really knowing what it was, and nodded in the affirmative. Gus returned with 4 mugs and a pot of coffee, poured it out, and they sipped it down, not saying much more. But each of them was almost purring with delight as they consumed the hot, dark beverage. Gus said he didn't recognize them and asked where they were from. One of the males pointed to his right, which happened to be in the direction of Bridgeport, and Gus said, "Ah, Bridgeport." They all shook their heads. After this exchange, they were relaxed but tired, so one of the women said, "It's late and we should get home. Thank you for your hospitality." So you can see they indeed learned the language while developing in the sludge near the plant. As the storm was settling into a light rain, they shook Gus's hand and headed for the door. When they got outside, they began walking north and east in the direction the one of them pointed to when talking with Gus. For his part, Gus wasn't sure what to make of this odd encounter, though he didn't hear the last of the 4. More on that in a bit. Anyway, their walk quickly landed the group in the Polish section of Bridgeport as the morning sun began to break through. As they strolled the neighborhood in their slaughterhouse coveralls, they tuned their ears to the conversations of passers-by, who looked at them much the same as those who've questioned this totally true response to my ancestry, "Look at me." One pair of them latched on to the name Smigielski. These highly intelligent life forms also each took a first name that they heard when they were below the surface of the Bubbly Creek listening to the workers. One of them was grousing about his sister and brother-in-law, Bernice and Mike. They thought those names had a nice sing-song quality when paired with Smigielski, Bernice and Mike Smigielski. The other 2 took the same approach, but landed on the names Albert and Jim. You see, as far as butter knives go, Albert and Jim weren't quite as sharp as Bernice and Mike, so they didn't realize that the Jim they heard about from beneath the oil slick was a man's name. So forevermore, they would be Al and Jim Schwapowski. After living above the surface for a few days and being subjected to a lot of off-center looks about Jim's name, Jim, being a fan of pancakes, loved Aunt Jemima syrup. That was available for the first time in 1889, and you could look that one up. So anyway, Jim, she adopted that as her full name, and the couple just explained it away that Jim was Al's pet name for Jemima. Problem solved. See, I told you these were intelligent beings. So anyway, after panhandling for a few more days, the 2 couples found their way back to our friend Gus and asked him if they knew of any available work for them and a place to live. Gus was a man of service. He hired Mike and Elle on the spot and pointed the ladies to some friends of his, to Hans and Gunnar Linnell, who were starting up a bakery. He introduced Hans and Gunnar to Bernice and Jim, who became their first employees. And Jim showed quite an aptitude for baking, creating a shortbread cookie she named the Pinwheel that had a chocolate swirl in it, and another that looked like a star with a dollop of red jelly centered on top of it. These turned out to be 2 of the biggest sellers at the Linnell Bakery. The couples landed in apartments near 32nd and Aberdeen Streets and assimilated into the community. Coming from where they came from, they had no use for religion, but yearned for community. They saw all the people flocking to church, school, and other events at the church across the street, so they feigned a religious foundation and began attending St. Mary of Perpetual Help Parish, where Al was eventually elected president of the parish's Holy Name Society, though neither couple ever really bought into all the pomp, circumstance, and mysticism. When the Schwapowskis and Smigielskis, coupled, my parents were born. The families decided to arrange their marriage unbeknownst to them, and in 1966, I was born. So you can see from these totally true facts, indeed, I'm really not Polish, but all-American. I trace my ancestry in a straight line to the Bubbly Creek in Bridgeport, USA. So now you know, I'm telling the truth. Next time on You Don't Say Totally True Facts, Little Green Things from Outer Space, the totally true story of the Roswell incident based on real facts. Okay, here's the CYA disclaimer once again, just in case you didn't get it the first time. Totally True Facts episodes are parodies, Let me say it again, parodies. I've changed the names in most cases to protect the innocent, though in others, the names of totally real people are used for the purpose of presenting the as-mentioned parody. I hope that you'll latch on to one of these facts and look up the totally true facts on your own. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review You Don't Say wherever you listen to podcasts and share with your family and friends. I welcome your feedback on Facebook and Instagram at YDS Stories and LinkedIn at Drew Zagorski. That's me. I'm Drew Zagorski. Thanks for listening to You Don't Say. Peace.